Hey guys, welcome back to Heavy Metal Horizons. So in today's video, we get to check out up close a real World War II era aircraft, and not just any aircraft, but a Boeing B-29 Superfortress bomber. So the B-29 is legendary. I mean, it was a cutting-edge aircraft when it came out. It had targeting computers and remote-controlled gun turrets. And of course, it's the model of aircraft that dropped the atomic bombs on Japan at the end of World War II in 1945. Now, what's really crazy is that from 1943 to 1946, they made almost 4,000 B-29 bombers. But today, there are only 2 that are still flying. So right now, they currently have one of the 2 flying B-29s, this one's called Doc, on display over at the Chino airport. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take a quick flight from here at the Flight Academy at Van Nuys, California, over to the Chino airport. We're going to check out the B-29. Then I'm also going to tell you guys a little bit about the restoration process they went through to get this plane flying again, because it wasn't like it was in showroom quality this whole time. It was actually sitting in the desert for decades, and they went through this really amazing, really difficult restoration process to get it flying again and into the amazing condition that it is in today that you'll see in the video. Okay guys, but real quick, if you like videos like this, videos about cars or airplanes, and you have not already subscribed, please consider subscribing right now. Okay, so Southern California flying plus a walkthrough of a real World War II era B-29. This is going to be an awesome video. Let's get in the air.
Archer 015, squawk 0271, runway 16 right, clear for takeoff.
Okay, squawking 0271, 16 right, clear for takeoff, 015. Alright, fuel pump is on, here we go. Airspeed's going up. 50, 60, 65.
Archer 015, turn left direct to the interchange, the 40511 interchange, contact tower.
Okay, left direct to the 405 interchange, and then I'll contact Burbank Tower. 015.
That's 1525 Delta, Chino Tower, number 2, Paul Piper, over the wash, runway 26 right for the land. Traffic will be on left down for the Pels at Skyhawk.
25 Delta, number 2, looking for traffic for the land.
07 Quebec, contact SoCal departure, good day.
Contacting SoCal, have a good day. 71 Quebec.
That's 3,000 until 24, looking for traffic.
I would take the knock side sitting on that if it's possible.
Okay, change to runway 26 right, number 2, follow the trade down, short runway 26 right, clear to land.
The 226 right, it's land.
So, 257.
Down.
Cessna left downwind, being the number, ensuring their base.
25 Delta is lucky. Traffic in sight until 24.
Until 24, you can continue descent, right side runway 26 right, at least fall on a Cessna 5-mile final.
Use descent bridge for other traffic until 24.
05 right, kilo, contact 1.6, they can give you directions to some parking next to you.
Okay, Alpha Kilo and ground point 6 for parking. 15.
After landing at Chino, I parked and then went over to the Yanks Air Museum, which is where they had Doc, the B-29 set up there. And it's hard to miss because B-29s are massive airplanes. And it's worth noting that it wasn't just the B-29 that they had there, but they were doing biplane rides and they had T-6s doing flights over the airport, and it just had kind of a nice kind of air show atmosphere. It was a very good turnout, and I think it just goes to show how much interest there is in a sort of flying museum piece like this. Now, I stood in line and I got a tour through the inside of the plane like everybody else, but before we get into that, I want to show you guys some of what was involved in the restoration process of this airplane, because it took a very, very long time, and it was one of these things where it almost didn't happen. And like I mentioned, today there's only 2 of these aircraft that are in flying condition. Now, there are a few others that are being worked on, so they're hoping that over time that number will expand. But this aircraft was originally made and delivered in March of 1945. And so this was towards the end of World War II, of course. And although this airplane was used during the war, as you can imagine, once the war was over, there wasn't nearly as much of a need for these airplanes as there had been before. So this aircraft was used for things like target towing, where they would tow up a plane that was to be used as a target. And then it ended up later that decade in the 50s just being parked out in the desert as sort of a practice bombing target. There it sat out in the China Lake area of California until the late 80s. So from the 50s to the 80s, it was just sitting out there in the desert. At that point, a guy named Tony Mazzolini, who had been a flight engineer on a B-29 during the Korean War, he wanted to find a new project plane for the Commemorative Air Force to restore, and he located this B-29 sitting out in the desert in California. They were finally able to tow the airplane out of the desert, and it was then disassembled, and they started the restoration process on it. So it was around 2000 where they started the actual restoration process. It took about 15 years, and then finally, in 2016, it had its first flight. And since then, the airplane has been touring the country, doing events like the one we're seeing here today. Now, let's look at the results of their hard work. There was a great tour guide inside the airplane here who was talking about everything and pointing things out. And unfortunately, the audio from him didn't really come out, so I'm just going to give you a voiceover here and talk about the same things that he was saying. So you enter in through the bomb bay doors. They had some dummy bombs in there, so you could see how the bomb racks were arranged and so forth. And he was talking about how the different types of bomb loads that they could carry. And if you look up there on the top, you see this sort of tube shape, right? Well, what was interesting about the B-29 is it was partially pressurized. And so the cockpit and the radio room and so forth, the front of the airplane was pressurized, and then the gun positions in the back were also pressurized, and this tube connected them. So when they would be up at altitude and you'd have to move around inside the airplane, you would have to actually crawl through that tube, because the cargo areas and of course the bomb bay areas of the airplane were not pressurized. So when you were up there at altitude, it was a pretty small section or area of the airplane that you could actually move around in. Also, this was before fly-by-wire systems were really common, so you can actually see the control cables against the inside of the fuselage there. Those are all the control cables going back to the control surfaces from the cockpit. Now, you went up this ladder here, and now you're on the flight deck area, and they've got the bombardier and the radio room and so forth, and then of course the cockpit. And this is all original equipment that they have in here. It was really, really cool to see. Now there's a shot of that pressurized tube. So imagine you're in one of these planes, you're flying up at 30,000 feet, you got to go to the back of the plane, you have to crawl through the tube there to get back there, because that was the only way you could stay in the pressurized section. I mean, look at this stuff here. Imagine the work that had to go into this, because this plane had been sitting in the desert for 30 years. It had been stripped and gutted. I mean, they had to do all of this work. It wasn't just about, the sheet metal and the engines and that kind of stuff, but the electronics and the radios and all the equipment on the inside of the airplane had to be restored as well. It's a huge amount of work. You can see the navigator's position there, and then of course there's that really distinctive cockpit. They always talk about how Steven Spielberg used the design of that cockpit for the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars. You can really see it there. And I should mention at this point, if you've got a bunch of money burning a hole in your pocket, you can buy a ride on one of these planes, but they're not cheap. After taking that tour, the thing that really jumped out to me was just the massive amount of work that must have gone into restoring that airplane. Because when you see it from the outside, it's like, yeah, it's nice and shiny and polished and it looks great, and it's like, oh, well, that must have taken a long time. But you go inside the plane and you see just how complicated that plane really is. And all of that stuff on the inside had to be restored as well, the whole thing. Anyway, it was a great experience. It was really cool to be able to walk through it. And after that, I took a few more pictures, and then it was time to head back and fly back home to Van Nuys.
And Chino Tower, Piper Archer 84015, holding short of runway 26 right for straight out departure.
Archer 8415, Chino Tower, traffic upwind. Arrow is in right close traffic, straight out approved. Runway 26 right, cleared for takeoff.
26 right, clear for takeoff, straight out approved, and I've got my eyes on that traffic there.
Sirius 3 Echo Hotel, you can resume.
Hey, fuel pump on, flaps, brake,
Following Tri-SoCal,
lights,
1225, good day.
fuel.
Just south of Bracket over to 71, command for a full stop with Juliet.
Cherokee 7412 Juliet, Chino Tower, make right traffic, runway 26 right.
We'll make right traffic for 26 right, 12 Juliet.
Arrow 2 for Yankee, runway 26 right, cleared for the option.
26 right, clear for the option, 28 for Yankee.
Piper 4015, say destination.
Destination is Van Nuys for 015.
05 Roger, continue runway heading until you cross the 71 for traffic inbound from the northwest.
Okay, maintain runway heading until past the freeway for inbound traffic 015.
Okay guys, that was awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Now real quick, I'm gonna put a link down in the video description below for the website for that airplane. That's www.b29doc.com. So you can go on there and you can look at the schedule and the different locations of where they're gonna have the aircraft on display if you wanna check it out yourself. It was really, really cool. Guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you soon.